Welcome to Determine Out Loud, our podcast series that's all about minding your business in contract management and source to pay. And now, your host, Buyers Meeting Point owner, Kelly Varner.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of Determine Out Loud. Today, my guest is Sophie Pope, Director of Customer Success at Determine. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi, Kelly. How are you?
I am just fine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. I'm excited to talk to you.
Good. Well, a few of the questions that we're going to address today actually go back to a webinar that you recently co-presented with Ollie Young, who's a senior solutions engineer at Determine, talking about the 5 ways an S2P or source to play platform helps create more value for an organization. And during that webinar, you took everyone through a really honest look at the differences between point solutions, full end-to-end platforms, and then something that you called Frankenstein platforms. So let's maybe start there. What on earth is a Frankenstein platform?
Well, I don't think it's a technical term, but actually it just popped into my head when we were doing the webinar. But really, the Frankenstein platform is this idea that some platforms or some technology solutions that may be marketed as platforms, shall we say, aren't really platforms at all. So if you pop the hood, you might see that there are different technology tools, if you like, that are working together to a greater or lesser extent with this kind of thin film or of UI or kind of skin stretched across it. So I think the idea is, it's kind of a natural phenomenon that has arisen through tech providers growing through merger and acquisition because, developing one platform with a true platform with one source code is a tough thing to do. And I think, the issue is that sometimes these parts of the platform they're not as slick as, something that's designed in synergy to work together.
So it's really kind of like multiple cobbled together solutions stuck under this, this veneer of an AI, user interface. So let's talk a little bit then, maybe on the more positive end of things. There are clearly true platforms, as you said. So you've got one data stack, one native code base where things were actually designed to work together, as opposed to being one thing in the interface and another thing under the hood. And then there are the ones that we've stuck together. It seems evident to me, at least, that the less of a Frankenstein feel you have in your source-to-pay technology, the better off you're going to be. But what about the notion between the difference of a platform versus either just a general or what might be considered a best-in-breed point solution? What are the advantages and disadvantages there?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good point. And I think that a lot of customers come to us at the point where they said, okay, well, we know we need technology. We know that we need help in a specific business function area to perform a particular task. And that's how we've got these kind of point solutions, sometimes very easy to set up for a particular department. They may be more plug and play. And they may be niche for a particular category, like a services procurement or parts of transport industry, etc. So, those technologies are great and they work really well if you're focused on a specific area. So the notion of a platform really is, okay, well, none of us work in isolation. None of us work in our own box and don't speak to other departments. We need data from different parts of the business. We're all using the same data, really, for slightly different reasons. But, the benefit of having the platform is that you've got one source of truth. That data administratively is looked after and is created once and is pulled into the different parts of the business. So you've got real-time visibility of what's going on in different parts of the business. And, cross-functional processes happen. if you look at, a contract, for example, so, someone wants to create a contract or a contract request in the business. That request could be from anywhere in the business. That then needs to come to potentially procurement, or it needs to go through legal. It's not, we don't work in these boxes. No. And I think the more that we can understand how data is used in a slick and controlled way, the best, more efficient the process can be, because we don't work in these kind of niche point solution environment. We work in an environment where, information and processes are fluid throughout the organization.
No, that's true. And all of those processes and all of the information that comes from them are really the result of people just trying to get their jobs done, as opposed to a process running for its own sake. So if we think about the people side of things, two of the points that you spent some time on in the webinar that will be very familiar to anyone in procurement are compliance and adoption. Now, traditionally, trying to improve them has taken procurement into the area of governance. So we put in place frameworks, we have policies, and they basically define what is the right way to buy or order or pay for something versus what's considered outside of the process. How should procurement think about compliance and adoption in a business environment where we're at the same time trying to work towards increased user and stakeholder satisfaction?
Yeah, I mean, great question, because what we're talking about is, is essentially change management, and how that you can go from, I guess there's two schools of thought, from a stick or a carrot approach. So, the stick approach is, here's the governance, here's the rules, you will obey them, and don't you dare go around it, otherwise you'll get a, slap on your knee. Or the carrot approach is, okay, well, let's make people's jobs easier so they don't want to go around the system. Most people don't flout process because they're anarchists. Most people flout it because the process is not slick enough for what they want to do, and there's an easier way around. So, I think that if we switch from, this kind of control and governance, which absolutely is important, 100% governance is, and audit traceability is important, but instead of forcing people to do something because that's the process, why don't we look at how we make it easier for them to do it because that's what they want to do? So, I don't know, quick example, we have a customer who is a really large automotive parts provider and car shop, actually in Europe. And, they were like, how do we get the stores and the mechanics to follow the process and to buy the bits we want them to do it? We've spent all this time negotiating costs. We've got these contracts, we've secured these amazing deals, and people are just picking up the phone and going locally to whoever they know to buy these parts. How do you do it? You make it really, really easy. So you make it easier for the person buying the part to go onto a website, point what they want in a catalog, stick it in a cart, and send it off for approval. They don't care where the budget goes. They don't care who approves it. They don't care, about going through big convoluted processes. What they care about is getting that part and getting it quickly. All the rest of it, the system can take care of. So by kind of changing the way that people work and thinking about, a positive impact that you can make on people's daily activities, that's a game changer, because then you have people that want to do it rather than you forcing them to do it because that's the rule.
No, and I think that's a critical way for us to look at it. And it's interesting because you talk about most people going outside of the process or circumventing the established rules just because they're doing what's easier for them, not because they're trying to be difficult. And in a way, the same exact thing exists for procurement. We put systems in place and we establish processes not because we think it makes us more important or because we like to be bossy, but because if we can get everybody to go through the same channel, then we can, make sure they're doing the right thing, of course, for the sake of savings and risk mitigation and all of that. But it also gives us far more visibility into data if people are going through the right channels and we have a mechanism set up to collect that. So if we talk about some of those data visibility challenges as maybe being the business driver from procurement's perspective behind some of these things we put in place, what do you think the real challenge is that we're facing around visibility? Is it an inability to report quickly? Are we trying to get around blind spots that may be inadvertently created either by technology or by a process that someone's following? Or is it the way that business units and different teams within the organization approach how procurement works? What do you think is the core issue behind some of the visibility challenges we have?
Oh, I think it's all of the above, because there are lots of challenges when it comes to data visibility. These disparate systems that we talked about are all using different sources of reference for their data. That's it. Again, it's kind of natural that organically departments have grown with technology as budget, resource, and capabilities allow. What that's left with us with is this. We've got a couple of options. We either plug systems into each other, which is an option.
Sure.
It does require. It's usually quite costly, and it requires a real foresight of what data is needed at that time. I mean, how many of us have kind of created a report because our FD or CPO wants a particular report, and then you've worked really hard on this, and then 6 months later the parameters change. Well, the problem with that kind of point solution approach and integrating those different systems is that you have to be able to see or preempt what data you need up front. I think when it comes to visibility, if you have a single source of truth and the data is natively collected in the platform, it means that you get rid of all those problems. You don't have to pay someone for cleansing the data. You don't have to waste time working on discrepancies and wondering whether they're real, or it's just one person's view of the world versus another person's view of the world. I think there's so much work behind cleansing and giving true, reliable data that even kind of plugging these systems together or paying someone to cleanse what comes out of them. You're going to spend so much time wasted, really. And if you have data that you're not truly trusting, how good is that data anyway? I just think it's a tough one. It is a tough one.
It is, and it's a problem that's going to, I don't know if it'll get bigger, but at the very least, it's not going to go away, given that organizations are likely to spend more and more money on more different kinds of technology in the coming years than we even have in the past. And although the focus of the webinar that you and Ollie presented was source to pay, obviously something that everyone in procurement is very comfortable with. We're familiar with some of the common stumbling blocks of implementations or selection, or what you can expect it to do for you versus what you have to do for yourself and then roll out through the solution. In some ways, technology for human use, regardless of what kind it is always going to go through some of the same bumps and bruises that we get as we get more used to working with it. So as we talk about snazzy new technologies like AI and robotic process automation and machine learning, all of this more automation driven versus just taking things online, what sorts of lessons can we learn from the experiences we've had with source to pay that may actually help us avoid some of those bumps and bruises as we look to implement emerging technologies?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a hot topic, and we could talk for hours on some of these emerging technologies. I think that, the thing to remember is that, a new concept comes out, and a lot of people get very excited by it, and, there's lots of webinars around, and ultimately some of these technologies require a really good, foundation. So like we were talking about making decisions on good data, you need to have good data for some of these technologies to be effective.
That's
so,
true.
If you have, for example, just going back to my automotive example, if you have your mechanics picking up the phone and ordering a part, no amount of AI is going to improve that process.
No.
So if you don't have fundamentals of the way people work with technology, not restrictive, but there still needs to be process and, streamlining people through the same activities, particularly as we get more and more global in our operations. You need a good basis. You need good data in the first place, which again harks back to the disparate systems and pulling all that together to rapport. You need, leadership understanding of the real capabilities of these emerging technologies, and not kind of, flash in the pan, oh my God, let's turn about our strategy and everyone needs AI immediately, when we haven't even looked at what we can source with auctions yet, for example, or whatever it is. There's a real kind of lessons learned from introducing, and now cloud technology versus on-premise. There's lessons we can learn around change management and around, process and around leadership, kind of championing these different technologies. And, I guess the whole idea of these technologies is they will make our lives easier. And when they're ready to make our lives easier, we'll see it, because we'll go back to that carrot rather than a stick, where, we'll say, okay, yeah, I want that because that's instantly going to make my job easier. So, we need to have the good foundation first. And we really, certainly now we've learned from, point solution, you need to have platforms that take away that kind of dysfunctional or disjunction between different functions, to kind of set you up to be able to use these kind of technologies in the future.
Absolutely. And so whether it's the way that our processes align with the expectations that our buyers have, or then the next step to how well the platforms and technologies that we implement support those processes, the more alignment we have at the end of the day, the more we're able to do both to increase satisfaction and to get insight into our data and leverage that for future business decisions. Sophie, thank you so much for sharing your point of view on this.
No problem at all. Anytime.
And thank you everyone for listening. Be sure to look out for our next episode of Determine Out Loud.